Sue Stolfi, Marlboro.
Carrie?
Carrie Carlino, Marlboro.
Okay. Mike?
Mike Sharon, Hebron.
Joe?
Joe Coletti, Hebron.
Lori?
Lori Blake, Andover.
Gabe?
Gabe Marks, Hebron.
And Jessica?
Jessica Dapsis, Hebron.
Judy?
Judy Benson Clark, Marlboro.
And Mike Morris, Hebron. Scott?
Scott Leslie, Acting Superintendent.
Eva?
Eva Gallup, Business Manager.
Rowan?
Rowan Ackland, Hebron, Connecticut.
Okay, and Lily? All right, is there anybody else that I need to add to the roll?
We have a couple we have Mike and Chris Mader in the audience.
Okay, so Mike,
Michael Cerisi, middle school principal.
Chris?
Chris Mader, high school assistant principal.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. All right, this time, could I ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, move on to public comment. Just give me a moment and read through this, and then we'll move to any comments that are ready. So Hebron, Andover, and Marlboro community engagement and attendance at Board of Education public meetings is welcome. The public comment segment of the meeting agenda is set aside so the Board of Education may receive public comments. Procedurally, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and citizens will be asked to identify themselves. Because the Board of Education is limited by the Freedom of Information Act to discussing only matters on the agenda, the Board of Education is not permitted to engage in discussion of the comments presented. So based on that, is there anybody present in the audience today that would like to speak for public comment? All right, seeing none, is there anybody online that would like to present for public comment? Okay, please go ahead, sir. I think you're on mute. Still can't hear you, sorry.
Keeps going back on. Is it off now?
You're on, Andy.
You're good now.
All right. For some reason, it kept going back on. I apologize. So thank you very much. My name is Andrew Tierney. I'm the town manager for the town of Hebron. I'm also a resident of Marlboro, 14 Phelps Road. And I'd like to have public comment regarding the upcoming budget. So first off, I'd like to thank and welcome all of you for serving on the RHAM board. I appreciate being partners with you in these annual budgets, and hopefully we can work together and unitedly come forward with a budget that can get voted in the booth. So prior to tonight's meeting, the information I have, the budget was at a 0.7%. And if that's still the case, that still is an increase to the town of Hebron of $11,867. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but to me, $11,000 out of a $30 million budget isn't a lot to ask to see if we can't bring that down to zero for Hebron. One of the main reasons I asked that is we appreciated the credit that we got from RHAM last year for $363,922. This year, I'm going to have to backfill that revenue hole to bring the budget up to snuff. So you add that plus the $11,000. Hebron residents are looking at an increase. I know you've had some debt drop off about $1,482,000. And with that, you put $522,109 into CIP. I honor that. We do the same thing over here in Hebron. But you had a couple things that also are offsetting this budget. You had the CNG payments to the town of Hebron, which we funded, come off. And we're all experiencing very low, good health insurance numbers at a -4%. So I think I've been working as a partner very hard and diligently to get your budget numbers down and lower them accordingly. The Hebron taxpayers, their budgets are going to be going up due to the levy change to Hebron. And also, we just went through a reval. Not sure on your surplus. I see the audit is on the agenda, but you have the ability to keep a 2% of that. So that, in my mind, might even equal another $600,000. So my request is please try and reduce the increase of the 11,867 And please do not add any new positions to this budget. Hebron residents' taxes will be going up. I ask both the RHAM and the local Board of Ed to sharpen their pencils so we can have a budget we can all support in the voting booth. I have cut the town's budget over $300,000 from the department's request, and I'm sure in the next coming weeks, it's going to be cut even more. So thank you for your time, and thank you for serving.
Thank you, Mr. Tierney. Appreciate it. Anyone else online? Anybody here is raising their hands or anything? No? Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to speak up during public comment or if I'm scheduled because I didn't see myself on the agenda.
Jackie, you're scheduled during the budget discussion.
Thank you.
Great. All right, so unless there's no other public comment, we'll move on. Item number 4, any additions or deletions to the agenda items? Open to the board. Okay, hearing nothing.
Hold on a second, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure we were clear. During the facilities, safety and transportation section in the committee reports, I'm going to run through our minutes. We'll have that discussion at that.
Correct. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to be sure.
All right. Then we'll move on to item number 5, report of the auditor.
So online, we have Joe and Catherine. They're our auditing firm from PKF O'Connor Davies. They're going to be going over what we handed out was 2 pages of certain key points that they wanted to go over. You have your annual financial report, which is the thicker one, and the state single audit, which is the thinner book. So Joe, Catherine, please feel free to take the reins and walk us through it.
All right, I'm gonna start off and start off with some significant changes from last year's report. So the grants fund and the school lunch fund were previously reported, we'll say up front in on Exhibit C and D as major funds, and this year, based upon the major fund calculation, they were non-major funds, so they're just reported after the footnote. So it's just a change in location. So if you're looking for them, just wanted to point that out, that they are still part of the audit and included in the audit process. They're just on a different page than they were last year. And the other thing that was new this year is we implemented Gatsby 84 related to fiduciary funds, and that required a reclassification of student activity funds from fiduciary, no longer meets the definition, to a special revenue fund. So if you look at page 50, which is the last footnote, it just shows the prior period adjustment for that change in fund classification. And you also will see the reclassification of the cafeteria and the grants fund from basically major, where it's reported, to other governmental funds versus being on Exhibit C and D separately. So as Eva mentioned, you have 2 reports. The larger one is the financial statements, which I'll walk through, and then Catherine will highlight the state single audit and recommendations. So the opinion on the financial statements on pages 1 through 3 is an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the type of opinion that you are looking for. As in the past, I recommend that everybody read the management discussion and analysis. It's a good executive summary of the fiscal year operations and any of the significant changes as compared to prior year. Some of the things it talks about are the financial highlights, the government-wide, and then the fund financials, which is for the general fund, the budgetary funds. On page 10, it talks about the significant budgetary highlights. You had some significant transfers between departments during the year, and those are discussed there. The operating results for each major fund. The remaining major funds are the capital improvement fund and the capital non-recurring fund. And it talks about the results, the operating results, so whether added or increased or decreased fund balance. And it talks about some significant capital asset additions. Your additions were $941,382 during the year, and long-term debt decreased by the $2.5 million as compared to the prior year. Looking at the general fund GAAP basis financials, so on page 16, your assigned fund balance is the 1,829,053. If you look at Exhibit C, that's third line from the bottom. And operation-wise, your net change in fund balance was an increase of 658,617. Again, that's on Exhibit D, which should be I think the third line from the bottom. And there's about 30 pages of footnotes. There's nothing really significant in there as compared to prior year, other than the couple things that we mentioned as far as the changes, the prior period note, and the reclassifications. So on a budgetary basis, looking at page 51, this is RSI 1A and B. Your revenues were below budget by $202,000. You did appropriate $197,000 of fund balance, and your expenditures were under budget by $1,058,086. So the significant revenue variances were intergovernmental was under budget by the $123,625. Charges for services were down $62,570. Is expected and related to COVID, and the appropriation of fund balance, there's no actual revenue there. So that's the same 197,079. There is that significant expenditure. Under expenditures were construction special ed for $217,000, support services for students for $124,000, central services $315,000. Operation of plant maintenance of 105, and transportation of 158 roughly. So some of those are discussed in more detail, like what were the causes for that. You know, the use of the hybrid model and still being in the pandemic was the reason for several of those, but the detailed discussion will be in the MD&A. And then as far as our OPEB, just still as pay as you go, you don't have a funded plan, and the liability increased from the 5.935 to the 6,108, about an increase of 173,000 as compared to the prior year.
And on your state single audit, we had no findings or question costs on that. We tested the healthy foods and the adult ed grants. You also received a communication with those charged with governance. This is communications that we as the auditors have to give to the board. It describes our responsibilities under professional standards, our responsibilities to form an opinion about the financial statements if they're presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles. We also state that we're independent and that we also discuss any adjustments to the financial statements. There were not any adjustments that remained uncorrected. You should have also received our recommendations to management. This letter is a lot smaller than it was last year. We removed several recommendations, including the accounts payable and the pay rate segregation of duties, the recording of the education grant receivable and unearned revenues, and the fraud policy, as those were all corrected during the fiscal year. The two recommendations that remain are the capital assets, which is accounting for construction progress activity by project, and the general ledger maintenance accounts payable. Our recommendation is just that the accounting system correctly report accounts payable at year end instead of the district having to make adjustments to report a correct balance of accounts payable, which we've already discussed with Eva, and those will be corrected for the fiscal 22 audit. And the last item we wanted to discuss with you are new applicable Gatsby statements. Gatsby 87 for lease accounting will be applicable for the fiscal 22 audit. Essentially, we'll be evaluating any lease agreements that you have, any leases that were previously classified as operating leases. If they're material, they'll end up being classified as an asset and a lease liability on the government-wide statements. But we don't expect there to be a significant effect on your financial statements next year.
All right, so be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Go around the room and anybody questions? Here. Any board members online questions?
No.
Okay. I don't think we have any questions. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you for your time.
Good night, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 6, student representative reports. Lily?
Good evening. It's nice to see you all about masks. And that will be a discussion topic for me, but before then, I'll just touch on some little things.
Can you speak up, please?
Yeah. So, this past weekend, there was a wrestling tournament, and as of then, Emma Heslin, who's a current senior, became the first girl in RHAM high school history to be first in states. So that's really cool. And
If I could just interject that she did it in style. She pinned her opponent in the finals. I watched it and it was fantastic.
Yep. And her brother Jackson, I'm not aware of what school he goes to, but
Xavier.
Xavier, okay. He also won first. So it is also the first time in, I think, even Connecticut history
It is.
that two siblings have won first. So that's really cool, and it's good to see a woman win in a male-dominated sport. In terms of like seniors in general, a lot of people are doing college visits, especially with colleges they've already gotten into. Many people are committing now, or at least word is going around. And now that more restrictions are lifted, people are more excited about things like prom and senior outing. People are even hoping that with the restriction lifted that masks are not optional, that hopefully we can bring other people from other schools to prom and maybe, I guess, look into more activities for the senior class to do. And I'm sure you all know today was the first day in school where masks were optional. And I can just sort of touch on how school was for me, at least. A lot of people still actually are wearing masks, more than I thought. And a lot of people are like feeling safe, feeling good. Some aren't. I know of some students who think that lifting this restriction was a bad choice, but some teachers are acknowledging that, and we're even saying if you're uncomfortable, we can have masked people sit on this side of the room, unmasked people sit on other sides of the room. So we're just sort of accommodating everybody's own comfort levels, I guess. I think that as more and more days pass where masks are optional, less and less people are going to wear them. Especially, I noticed I am in select choir, and obviously when you're singing, you don't want to wear a mask. So I saw more and more people taking off their masks during class, and a lot of people would just wear them in the hallways, not wear them during class, and it's all up to you, whatever you want to do. But I think when more and more people, see that less people are wearing masks, they're also going to conform, which is, it's all up to you. And in terms of like polarizing views, it is still very relevant in high school people. There hasn't been any like bullying, I guess. Everyone's respecting other people's decisions, and I think that's really great. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm sure in the next meeting we'll see about how, whether spikes happening or whether there is issues that come up. But right now it looks like we're in the clear. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Rome?
Okay, so I just wanted to touch on, because I know we were on one of the most recent budget workshop, we were touching on the early childhood education class and the foods and culinary class. And I compiled over the past couple of weeks some more data in regards to student interest. So I just wanted to share some of that with you today. So regarding interest in the early childhood education class, it was kind of 50-50. 51.9% voted yes, and 48.1% voted no, and that was out of 154 responses. And actually, I should have said this before, but with the help of actually Mr. Mader, Mrs. Weddle, and even Dr. Strusi, who was able to send the survey out to 8th graders coming up to the high school, students did have the opportunity in the high school and in the middle school to give their response here. So out of 154 responses for the ECE class, a total of 80 students responded yes, in regards to their interests. For the foods and culinary class, there were 139 responses. Taking into account that this got sent out a little later than the early childhood education classes. It was a big difference in yes or no's. 80.6% of the kids voted yes, 19.4% voted no. A total of 112 kids voted yes for the foods and culinary class. So I just wanted to share that with the board today regarding student interest in the ECE and foods and culinary class.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that work. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. We'll move on to item 7, the board chair report. So Lily stole some of my fire. I wanted to also say congratulations to Emma Esselin and her brother Jackson. Jackson, they're both, I think they're still Marlboro residents, if I remember right, where they were. But they're still obviously fall under the RHAM umbrella. And it was fantastic what they did this week. They made Connecticut sports history, and it was awesome to watch. So
they are in Marlboro. They
Great.
live right across the street from me.
great. And I just being a part of the wrestling community for a very long time in this area, I can attest personally that the amount of time and energy they put in to getting to that point is measured in multiple years. I mean, I think I remember them, specifically Jackson, from the time he was in, call it first, second, third grade. So this is a long time coming, and I know it's the same for Emma. So fantastic job for both of them. Again, Lily stole some of my fire. Mask bullying. I know that the administration and the staff have been extremely proactive about communicating on this, and I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you very much for doing that. It's obviously a sensitive subject still. I really am encouraged to hear that we're making even small mitigating decisions within the classrooms to try and do the best we can to accommodate everybody, and that's fantastic. So it's encouraging. I appreciate everybody's help with that. One other thing I wanted to share is it's a little hard to avoid global events right now. If you turn on a radio, a TV, look on your cell phone or iPad or computer. I don't really want to get into the politics of it, but we are being inundated with some pretty serious and dangerous events in the world. And I would just ask everybody to just take a moment to think about the fact that there are probably students, staff, parents, members of our community who are impacted in one way or another, whether they have family, friends, and relatives in those areas, or they have military members who may currently or in the future be exposed. Those are challenging things in everybody's lives, and you don't really always know exactly who's being impacted by that and who's not. Children of military members, I think, carry a lot of the burden, unfortunately, for their parents' decisions to be in the military, and that's another thing that I know probably teachers are very well attuned to whose children are affected by that and whose aren't, but not all of us. And so I would just, again, reiterate that I think it was Lori Blake that told me that a little bit of grace for everybody is probably the call of the day and going forward in these kind of dangerous times. With that, I have nothing else. So we'll move on to number 9, consent of the agenda.
You skipped one.
Oh, did I skip? Oh, sorry, reported, my bad. My bad, I apologize. Actually, before I pass it on, one other thing, I just want to apologize to the room and people online and anybody else that was participating in the initial meeting. I apologize for being late. It's unacceptable and no excuse, but honest mistake, but no excuse. All right, I'm sorry. Number 8, the report of the superintendent.
Great, good save. I'd like to start by giving my public thanks and congratulations to Eva for the outstanding auditor's report. I think we all know what a phenomenal job Eva does in managing the district's $30 million budget, which isn't a small feat. We know that. I know that. Certainly personally know that because I rely on her every single day. And it's nice when somebody from the outside comes in with an objective lens and in turn recognizes the outstanding job that our business department does in managing our budget. So thank you. Congratulations. The other thing I'm going to have to ask is that from here on in, Mike puts me before the student report, share reports. Because I don't think we can minimize what today meant for not only RHAM High School, but every other high school in Connecticut and in many other states. We are, I don't want to jump the gun and say that we're through it, but certainly those of us that have been here for the entire brunt of the pandemic, and certainly our juniors and seniors, more so than anybody have, it's been a nice transition. And I have to give credit to the administrative team. A lot of forethought went into this with very little opportunity or time, as I think the board can recognize by my almost daily updates of here's where we think things might be by tomorrow, but it might be different. And, things are moving pretty quickly for us between the House ruling on the legislation, followed by the Senate, followed by the Department of Health, and even over the weekend, followed by the CDC, which allowed us to go mask optional on our buses. And I think I know our administrative team really worked hard to make sure that they were communicating to our families and our students and our staff each step of the way, so that, I think we all understood that when we got to this point, it was, and I'm sure I'm speaking for many people in the school community and beyond, that after having worn masks for 2 years, to take them off, whether you think they do anything or not, is still a bit of a traumatic experience. It can be, certainly. And I know that our administrative team was working each day in helping our staff acclimate to the idea, helping our students acclimate to the idea. So, being in the building, I think probably the most positive and accurate report I can give you is that it felt very much like it did on March 12th, 2020, the day before we left, than it did any day over the last couple of years. So I really commend the entire community for doing such a great job in working together and supporting each other as we've gone through this. And again, I thank our team for helping guide the entire community through this. One of the pieces that we'd hoped to do tonight, but we postponed due to the busy schedule that we have, is we will be reporting out in March on the efforts of our school counseling department and schools as a whole in addressing some of the student social emotional challenges over the last couple of years. So we had originally earmarked that presentation for this evening, but again, because of time constraint, budget discussions, we postponed that until March. So that'll be hopefully first report and center in our March presentation. So.
All right, thank you.
May I speak? I'd like to go to the audit and the book that came to me. And I look at the recommendations, very, very slight. Almost information. And then there's a list below of what the recommendations were last year. Again, a short list and all resolved. Coming from a Board of Finance position with Andover, audits were a nightmare. And when you get behind and you get confused and your information gets a little out of whack, it can really pull you under. And it can take an enormous effort to straighten it up. So to see an audit like this and see that it is as clean as a whistle is just a wonderful thing and a great accomplishment, in my opinion.
Thank you. I guess thank Eva is the right way to say
There you
that.
go.
Okay. So if we move on to item number 9, consent of the agenda. The minutes are in enclosure 9.1. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. This is Mike Sharon Hebron.
I'll second that motion. Gabe Marks Hebron.
Okay, Gabe. Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Right.
Any online?
Yes.
Yes.
We need to go roll on this?
It looks like they're going through the roll.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Any against? Okay. The minutes are approved. All right, old business. 10.1, discussion and possible action of a proposed Region 8 2022-2023 budget issue. So I think this is the point where we would be discussing the ECE
Absolutely.
program.
I think just to, before we get started, to go back to the audit once more, and the surplus calculation form that actually Eva put together, not the auditors, it does give you the final status of the surplus funds from 2021. So right now, the board has a total of $658,615 in surplus funds from 2021. 2% of that year's budget equates to $612,385. That's the 2% that the RAM board can choose to hold on to and earmark or dedicate towards capital projects. The surplus above and beyond that 2% is $46,230. We must return that money to the towns. I don't know if Andy Tierney has second sight or if he's using tarot cards or something, but the $22,315,000 going back to Hebron would alleviate the $18,000 that they're currently, or the $11,000 that they certainly have. So, and then some. So Andover will receive $8,016.28. Hebron will receive $22,315.22. And Marlborough will receive $15,898.50. Again, that's what the audit is telling us. Now it's really up to the RAM board to decide what to do with that 2% and where that goes in terms of your plan. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So I believe we have somebody here to present for us. Thank you for taking the time, Jacqueline. Really appreciate it, you being here.
Thanks for allowing me.
So maybe I just tee this up. So when we last met, we were discussing the ECE program, Early Childhood Education Program specifically. There was initially a motion made by Sue Stolpe to add a 1.0 FTE back in for the purposes of accommodating that ECE program. What we, I think, quickly decided was that we didn't have really enough information to make a decision on that. And so a combination of what Rowan did for us and some data gathering for interest from the students, supported by the staff, which I really appreciate you doing that with him. And then also asking Jacqueline to come back and give us a deeper dive on the CTE's history and also the current situation for that program, so that we as a board had an opportunity to kind of have a better understanding of what kind of a decision we were making. So at that point, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you, Mike. And Jacqueline, thank you for coming tonight. I know we're all excited about this. And we really wanted to see the information that Rowan shared tonight. And I'm unclear, how do we access that? Has that been emailed to us or?
I actually included it in my presentation.
Oh, it's in yours. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I really am happy to be here to help answer some questions that you had after I left on the 15th. So I appreciate the time that you're giving me tonight. Family and consumer science proposal is what I'm going to be discussing tonight. We were referring a lot to early childhood education, but we need to understand that this certification area actually is family and consumer science. So this position encompasses foods, nutrition and wellness, early childhood education, human development, resource management, and then career exploration within education and hospitality. These are some historical numbers that you were requesting. So I went and I pulled in the data to show you where we have been over the years. So back in 2016-17, we had 4 sections of ECE, and you can see that that's consistent for the last 7 years. We can look back and see that there were 14 sections total, 16 sections, 10 sections, all in the area of food, which is food and nutrition. We had 2 levels of that for some of our recent graduates. You could probably remember those classes. Highly popular, and then when we look at the data from the current survey that Rowan did, you're going to see that it is still a popular subject. You can notice in 2019 that that's when the foods classes were no longer offered. And that was when Carolyn Anderson retired and we didn't fill the position. We kept a 0.4 position from there on out for those sequential 3 years from 2019 through 2021. That spring of 2021 is when Diane decided to leave us. I will tell you the pandemic did a number on our teachers. And I think at that point, she decided that she couldn't do this anymore. And she was a phenomenal person within our department, but I don't blame her for retiring when she did. At that point, Jen Rojas came in and she taught for us from the 2021 spring semester there. So we did maintain those 4 sections in the spring of 2021. Following that, for the 5 months that we posted the 0.4 position, we did not get any interest in that position. So no one applied. And I mentioned previously that a 0.4 is really not sustainable and it's really not a good place for a teacher. Diane was retired, technically working still. It's a good spot for someone like that. But when you're trying to recruit a new hire, someone that's young and motivated and really wanting to work in the field, 0.4 was not cutting it. So those sections were eliminated for this school year. We turned away 4 sections of students this school year. Here's some student interest information, and my numbers are a little bit higher than Rowan's because I collected the data up until the 23rd. So this started on the 16th. I checked the numbers as of the 23rd, which was the end of last week. And we had 82 students interested in ECE, and we had 121 students interested in food or the culinary area. So this survey reflects enough interest that we could potentially accommodate 4 sections of ECE like we had done in the past, and then 6 sections of food and nutrition classes, which would help support that 1.0 position. We would also be helping our students with the health and safety graduation requirement by accommodating these sections. And our school counseling team is amazing. And they've been, as if you were able to walk through school counseling in the past 2 weeks, you would see that they are revolving doors of kids coming in and out talking about what am I going to take next year and really looking forward to scheduling their classes. And they're really amazing as far as accommodating student requests. Curriculum, classroom, and facilities. These were questions that came up as well after I left. So we do have existing curriculum for all of these classes. This is not something that's new. This is something that was already established and we have it in place. Our ECE classroom is adjacent right next door to the AHM preschool, and the practical application with field experience in that preschool is still an option for our students. There are minimal supplies needed for that program area. So I'm talking about ECE at this point. We have current line items actually in the 22-23 proposed budget for those areas already. We just don't have a salaried teaching position in the budget. The foods classroom has fully functioning stations. We have brand new equipment in there that we have new microwaves. We have some new dishwashers. The stoves, I did work with Eva and Mike Schleihofer to go through there and check everything out. And I will tell you that there's going to be minimal supplies needed in order to keep that classroom functioning for the next few years. So my budget request would be a 1.0 position, and I'm actually going to be proposing that we kind of meet in the middle there on the salary. Step 5 actually is where I think would be a relevant number. And I'm doing this based on the 2 known candidates that I have. And these 2 candidates do not work in another district. So we are not poaching anyone or taking anyone from another school. One is actually a stay-at-home mom currently and has experience in ECE. And then we also have another candidate, which I already mentioned, who filled in for a temporary basis after Diane left. $4,000 is what I would be suggesting for instructional supplies, and that is simply to accommodate the foods classroom. We already, as I mentioned, have a $3,000 budget in the proposed for 22-23 for ECE. And then I would ask for $1,000 for repair and maintenance for this area, just in case we have some appliance issues or major purchases or repairs that need to happen in the kitchen. Future considerations. So the hospitality and food service industry is in dire need of employees right now. I wouldn't want to use the word crisis, but I'm almost certain to call it a crisis because there are major shortages within the food service industry right now. If you've gone out to eat anywhere, I'm sure you've known that they're short-staffed everywhere you go, and they're really struggling. So if we were to offer up culinary classes again to our students, it could potentially help local businesses in this area. Serve Safe curriculum is one that I would like to incorporate in the future. It's an industry recognized credential and it aligns nicely with our Perkins grant funding. The food service management course is one that we had offered in the past. And if you look at the budgets from previous years when that was operating, that industrial kitchen has been vacant for the last 4 years now. So there are 3 years, I apologize. And I would assume that there's big numbers that Eva and I had explored, over $30,000 worth of materials in there that we're going to need to replace. However, this is not in our short-term plan. This would be one that I would have to establish a long-term plan to get up and running, and I could offset those district costs by utilizing the Perkins grant funding that applies for our hospitality area. So some other future considerations that I'd like the board to be aware of is that we have a high interest in the CTE program areas. Our numbers are always really, really great. Kids love our program areas, and I like to say that they come to school mostly for our areas because we do offer a lot of hands-on experiences, as you have heard from my previous presentation. And some staff reductions that we've faced in the last 5 years have led to 6 assignments for a majority of the CTE teachers, which means that they're not teaching 5 classes, they're teaching 6 out of the 8. And there is a significant pay increase for those teachers, which they're probably going to kick me for saying this, but it's leading to teacher burnout. So I want the board to consider that when you review this item and to think about how we can be more cost efficient with our salaries, and we can maybe consider adding some positions in the future in order to help our CT area teachers. This is just a really quick graphic I wanted to show you. And when I talked about the crisis and how the pandemic has affected our leisure and hospitality industry, you can see there was a dramatic drop off in employment for that area during the pandemic. And you can now see that even as of December 2020, we are starting to see an increase. And the same is going to be happening over the next 5 years as that industry recovers. And I think whatever we can do to provide our students with some skills that they can then help the community, I would really encourage the board to consider doing that. So I thank you for your time. And if there are any questions right now on anything that I presented, I'd be happy to answer them.
I definitely have a couple questions.
Sure.
So the Perkins grant, you mentioned about how we could use that as part of funding. I think what you said is the kitchen, basically the kitchen upgrades, right? How does that impact what we're using the Perkins grant for today?
So in the past 5 years, we have spent a lot of our Perkins funding on our manufacturing shop.
I'm sorry, I should ask this first. I think is that like about $20,000, something like that?
Yeah.
A year?
Approximately 20,000. It varies. I actually haven't gotten the numbers yet from the state for this upcoming school year. But I did meet with them last week and they said they'd be hopefully releasing that soon. So it's approximately $20,000. So when I said it would be a long-term plan to get this going, it would have to be. Simply because if we look at one refrigerator in that industrial kitchen that needs to be replaced, that could be $15,000 alone. So my goal would be to work with my department to establish where do we want to apply the Perkins funds? And if this is an area that the board wanted to see us go in, then I would have to allocate in the grant for that. So that would be a long-term plan.
Okay. When you talk about long-term plan for the kitchen recovery, did you put any kind of number to it? Like, were we talking 7 or 8 years, 5 years?
I would say it would have to be a 3 to 5 year plan. Simply because right now I'm going to be reevaluating our needs assessment. And that's going to be happening by May 2nd. So once we do that and we meet with all of our stakeholders, our advisory board committee, which includes all of industry partners, so manufacturing, hospitality, marketing, finance, engineering, computer science, every field, we have to meet with them to discuss what's going on in the industry. And we look at Department of Labor statistics and we try to figure out where are we going over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm going to be working on that shortly.
But just a history question. In 2000, I know you covered it a little bit, but I don't think I completely understood it. So whether it's you, Scott, or Jacqueline, or any of the board members that are the veterans from that time frame, in 2019, why did the foods program go away?
I think Scott could answer that.
Sure. So we had it, let me just take one step back. We first eliminated the commercial foods program, and that was due to enrollment. We were only getting 6, maybe 8 students interested in the program. So that really died because we just simply weren't getting even an adequate number to host, one section of that program. We had kind of 2 things happening when the foods program was eliminated. One was the middle school had a retirement in their family consumer science program, and they had no candidates for that position. Carolyn Anderson, who was teaching the foods program at the time, ended up moving to the middle school for a year to cover that position because we couldn't fill it. The board had lengthy discussions with Sam Shattle regarding foods and the hospitality career pathway. And Sam, some of the board members who've been on for a while may remember Sam talked about how the shoreline schools had, tended to have the hospitality career pathways. And then north of the shoreline, you had the manufacturing career pathways. It was agreed with Sam and the board that we really didn't have the enrollment to support both a career pathway or a hospitality pathway and a manufacturing. So, and at the time, the foods and nutrition did not have a career pathway associated with it. So it was decided to eliminate that program, focus on manufacturing, and then Carolyn Anderson was transferred to the middle school and stayed for a year. And then when she did retire, we couldn't fill that position. So we ended up that's when we moved that position to a more health and wellness.
Okay. I think you said, you answered my question with 82 students that have demonstrated an interest in potentially ECE, that's approximately 4 sections, is that right? And at 121 students, that is approximately 6 sections of culinary?
With turning away some students as well, yeah.
Okay, so I guess the only other question I had is, how does that impact, so you're talking about 203 students, but my math is right. How does that impact the other CTE programs? Does that draw any of them underwater for participation?
That's a good question, Mike, but unfortunately we wouldn't know that unless.
I guess I'm just looking for a ballpark. I mean, you have an estimate or even any impression on how, is it likely that would happen or no?
I wouldn't know.
I can give you some numbers.
Scott, I think that is a very difficult question, and I think Jacqueline is appropriate to not answer that because let's face it, the world is changing, right? The Great Resignation and adults are changing, and so we don't yet know what that will look like for students and coursework. And I hear a lot of the gentlemen on the board speak about precision and numbers and mathematics, and I would think that they would want a real valuable answer and not a guess. And the very best we could do for that is guess.
Well, I can provide, I mean, I do have some data, Judy, that, when we do our enrollment calculations, we have to ask what can we support and what can't we support. So right now, this year, we have 43 elective sections with 10 or fewer students, 8 in CTE. We have 33 core sections. So electives would be CTE, world language, music and art. Core sections, English, science, math, social studies. We have 33 core sections with 10 or fewer students. If you look at our courses with multiple sections, we have 50 of those courses that have averages of less than 10 students. So you might have one section of 12 students, but another section of 5. And so they're, below 10 altogether. We have, in looking right now at the requests for next year, we have about 25 students who still need to, so this isn't an exact science at this point. We have in CTE, we have 10 sections with 10 or fewer students. 7 of those, we have fewer than 8 students requesting. So, when we look at the current, I'm not just talking about CTE, it's across the board, we do have a significant number of course sections with fewer than 10 students, and some of them significantly fewer. So if you did take those students, they would come from somewhere, and I can't tell you where, but we do have certainly vulnerable sections. And I don't know if, because students have already registered, whether they'd be able to make that move into new sections.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else?
If a student shows interest, are we assuming that they would sign up? That's the assumption.
I think you can make the assumption that they're interested in signing up. And the question is, what impact does that have on their current schedule? So if they've already got classes they like, then they may not be able to, or they may leave other sections to sign up, which could adversely impact other courses. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you have to assume that they're expressing a genuine interest.
Yeah, Mike, go around the room. Go ahead, Mike. Want me to go?
Jack, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned the 6th assignments. What I didn't get from the message was whether or not, would those 6th assignments go away with the addition of the 1 FTE to facilitate the addition of these classes?
No, but right now what we're struggling with is our tech ed positions. So construction was sunsetted and not brought back. So we lost a teacher through attrition for that position. So what I'm just trying to put into the board's mind is to think about these areas are strong program areas. And if we continue to sunset or eliminate positions based on retirement, where are we going to end up? And a lot of our students are going to opt to go to a tech school or another school where they offer programs. So I don't think that our programs are struggling by any means. I've looked at the course requests already, and we have more than enough requests to fill every single teaching position that we have in our department right now. And I would say that based on the student interest that you saw, we could easily accommodate for a family and consumer science position and fill this area that we have essentially said is unimportant, in my opinion. So I just want to ask the board to reconsider, and whatever decision you make is respected. But I do really want you to think about the impact that this has on students over time, because once we eliminate something, the chances of getting that back are slim to none, as we've seen in the past.
Thank you.
Joe?
Just in terms of numbers, like from what you calculated for data, how many students said, do you know how many students said yes to each?
Yep, 82 for early childhood ed, which is our teaching mostly, category, education and human services. And then we had 121 respond to the culinary program.
So those are different. So
Family and consumer science is the umbrella certification, the 045 that Scott's addressed before, where they said that we couldn't find someone, but I feel strongly that if it was posted, we would be able to find a candidate. Right now, Manchester and Southington posted for a family and consumer science position recently in the past couple weeks, 2 weeks. We've seen 2 more postings for full-time teachers. So I just would ask the board to reconsider. That's
One quick question. The salary that you commented on, how does it compare to what those 2 postings were? Do you know?
I don't know what those districts would. No.
Is anybody
I
in
don't-
line with those questions?
I don't think we can, I mean, we can put numbers in for budgetary purposes, but I mean, that would be, if we did agree to restore the position and we hired someone, the salary is determined by the teacher's contract.
Right. Can I also add one comment too that I just thought of? Back in September, this position was sunsetted with respect to we couldn't find a teacher. So I just want to say that we can find a teacher if we post for this position at a 1.0. I'm pretty confident in that.
Anyone else online with questions? Go ahead.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a motion. Is now the time to do that?
Why don't we just ask if there's any other questions or information at, and then certainly come back to that, Sue. Is there anybody else online that has any questions or concerns that they think we need to discuss?
Well, actually, I think a lot of times discussion comes after motion, after it's
Okay.
approved, right?
That's fine. Sue, if you want to go ahead and make your motion, that's fine.
Okay, I'd like to restore a 1.0 position for family and consumer science.
I will second that.
Okay. All right, so discussion.
Jacqueline, did you have another comment to make?
I just wanted to ask, I wouldn't want this to negatively impact anything else within our current budget. So I would just ask the board to please not ask for any elimination underneath the operating budget, because I think that the team has done a phenomenal job of proposing a really fiscally sound proposal here, and I wouldn't want to impact that, because what I've been hearing is that we would be eliminating another teaching position if we added this, and I really don't want to see that happen. So that's the one request that I'm going to ask, and I know it's just a request, but I want you to think about that, because I do know some of the things that have been coming to department coordinators is that if something's added, something needs to get cut, and I would caution not eliminating anything from the operating budget, because we are in, as you've seen, a really good position this year with a -%. And I know with our surplus, you guys can probably be really smart with how you spend your money. So I just appreciate your time tonight, and I thank you so much. I'm gonna have a seat if no one else has a question for me.
I think if we do, we can always come back to you.
Absolutely, I'll be right here. Thank you so much.
So I have some things that I'd love to ask questions about, but I don't want to dominate the discussion. So I definitely want to open it up to the rest of the board if there's things that you feel like we should raise.
I thought, I guess I'm unclear, Mike. I thought you said that that was the deciding factor, or that that was most important if there were people who were available, because we didn't think that there were people who are available. I did try to re-listen to and look at notes from the last meeting. Is that, are my notes incorrect?
I think it was one of the information items or data points that we didn't have, which was one of the reasons why I think Sue was gracious enough to back off on the motion for last month so that we have an opportunity to kind of dig in and find out if that was in fact an issue or not. So that definitely was one of the data points we needed to get some answers on. I think Rowan's information about student interest was another key data point that we needed some information on. Any other concerns or comments?
I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead, please.
I just, I really like these programs, and I think some students always want to go to college, some don't. And I think this really is important to have these kind of programs available. So, because everybody doesn't learn the same way. And I just think it's a really important thing. And I really would hate to see us keep sunsetting programs.
Whatever.
I'm just trying to remember. I thought that in the past we looked for a 1.0 and couldn't get one, and then looked for a 0.4 and couldn't get one. And so I guess my question is, if we couldn't hire someone before, why are we able to now hire someone?
Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't share the same confidence that we would be able to hire somebody. I mean, I know people are out there, but I think it makes it even more challenging when you've got multiple districts now posting positions.
So is this, I think this is the board discussion now that, and I think, so if we tried and we didn't get someone, then we would have tried and we didn't get someone. I mean, we have reasonable confidence by our network department. Had we asked them to get these data points, they went and they got them. They are essentially assuring us that they know of more than one candidate, and times change, right? For all of us. Sometimes you're interested in a job you're qualified for, and at other times you're not. You want different things. I mean, the COVID, it's studied everywhere. People are changing job patterns right now.
Yeah, and also this is Mary. I do believe that, I don't know if it was Jacqueline who shared this. Wasn't the last search done during COVID or right around that time?
It was done the end of last year into this year.
Yeah, so I think there was some concern that perhaps we weren't getting a lot of applicants because of what was going on with the pandemic.
Fair. Mike, did you have any?
Yeah, we are in the middle of class enrollment time right now. I think it ends on Friday. It opened on the 21st, if I remember correctly. We're talking about budgeting for one full-time equivalent for next year's school year, and the kids would need to be notified about the availability of this class. If they've already registered, now they've got to make changes. Is it really viable to be able to give the kids, do the students have enough time to make these decisions? Can changes be made to accommodate the addition of this curriculum back into as an option? Just a practical question relative to filling the class.
Can I look at you, Chris Mader? Sure. Chris Mader is one of our assistant principals who schedules the high school.
Yeah, it definitely presents some pretty significant challenges. I can't say, speaking from my experiences as a scheduler, which is fairly limited, that we've ever done that with any success. Not to say it can't be done, but it's something that traditionally everything is. It's a very sequential process, to say the least. Once you start moving forward with course requests, going back on that, and in essence, students would be removing some of their elective course requests, not just potentially from the CTE department, but other elective areas that they had already counted on fulfilling the course request for. So it presents, like I said, pretty significant challenges in the scheduling process.
Somebody raised their hand online. Who's that? Eric?
I raised my hand, Mike.
Go ahead, Sue.
That comment is the second time or the third time I heard that about the program and the course study. I had a problem with it even being taken out because the budget wasn't passed. So I hope as a board in the future, we could somewhat work together on some type of policy that courses do not come out unless the budget is passed. Because we as a board did not approve it to come out, and it wasn't offered. So it should have remained in until we approved it. And it's unfortunate either way, but I feel like it would have been easier to, remove it at that point if we did all decide to remove it. But now, as we're hearing from Chris Mader, that it's not impossible, but it's going to pose some problems. Well, now, if the board votes to move forward with this, then we need to, think outside of the box and figure it out.
So you had commented that you were going to do a little bit of policy search to see if there was anything that covered this. Did you have a chance to do that or no?
I did. I don't see any policy around, pulling courses like this and doing this. So my next step was to call CABE and to ask CABE for any recommendations and any policies that they may have in other districts, and present that to the program committee or the policy committee to consider, having a policy or some type of, a new policy around this. Because I didn't find anything, but I could be wrong. There could be a policy out there, but I looked for a while.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think I like the idea of mapping out, having a roadmap that administrators can follow that is in keeping with what we as a board give them for guidance on how to address that problem when it comes up. So we don't have this pop up again, but I appreciate you doing that. I'm sorry, Lori, it looks like you had your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a clarifying question about that, and then I have something to say about the course. Scott, would this course have been, or these courses have been offered had you been able to find a teacher and they were not offered this year because you couldn't find a teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. And the challenge we had was they were offered at last year's scheduling, throughout last year's scheduling process. And because we couldn't find a teacher, we had all of those students who weren't then able to get the schedule they had hoped for. So it created quite a bit of disruption. And
Right. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think that that's quite a different story than administration choosing not to offer something without board approval, where we then have to go back and dive into the policy to change things, because that doesn't seem to be what happened. And I'm glad that that wasn't the case. So thank you for clarifying that. So
Lori,
my
was that
concern-
at 0.4, Lori, or 1.0?
it was at 0.4, I would assume, right, Scott?
yeah, right.
Right. So it was at 0.4 going forward with what the position had been. There hadn't been a change in the position either way, right? Higher or lower. It
Yeah.
couldn't be filled. The new school year was coming up. They had to make alternatives, right? And now we are where we're at. So I think that's how we got here, as opposed to the position being chosen to be eliminated through administration without coming to the board. I just think those are two very different ways that very different ways of thinking how we got here. And I just wanted to be clear on that for the board, first of all. But then my comment is, I want to see this program come back, and I want to see it thrive. And I feel like there is opportunity for that to be the case. I worry tremendously that if it's rushed to come back now, try to change student schedules out while we try to find a teacher that may or may not come even as a candidate. I mean, hopefully they do. There's potential interest. I know of someone in a neighboring district in this position who might be looking for a move, and Jackie has identified some, but we don't know definitively. We don't have a crystal ball. My fear is that if we rush to make it happen for next year and it fails, it will be determined that the program doesn't work at RHAM, and then the door will be closed, period. I find that concerning. So while I really want this to come back, I really want it to come back in the proper manner so that it can be successful. And I don't think that is for the 2022-23 school year. I think that it's hopefully for the 23-24 school year and moving beyond. I think that with forward planning or pre-planning, to generate discussion, to hire a teacher in a reasonable time and not, after course selections have been made, so that we're confident in what we can offer and offer robust sections and know that we will have someone in place. I mean, anything could happen. They could call the day before and not come, and that would be terrible, but we knew we had everything in line to set it up. And so for me, that feels like maybe a better decision, because I know if we force it and the courses either don't fill and we get someone, that's not good. If we get people to switch their schedules and the mayhem that is going to cause, and we don't get anyone, that's not going to go well. And then the next time this comes up, people are going to be much less apt to want to consider bringing this back because it's going to be deemed a failure. That's just my opinion, obviously, but I do worry about that.
So I know there's multiple board members that have their hands up, and I want to come back to you. I just want to let everybody know, because I don't think you can see that Jacqueline just had a point that she wanted to add to, and I thought maybe it'd be good if she went ahead and did that first, and then come back to the folks online that have questions. Go ahead.
I just want to comment that I transitioned into this role in November, and it was Sam Shadow leaving, me coming in, and I want to talk about some of that like collaboration piece that we are talking about as far as, planning with administration. And I did bring this up to administration in December. We spoke about it. We had a plan that I would be helping hire and recruit someone. So this discussion was around this position way back then. I was not notified of this program being eliminated until early January. So I'm just letting the board understand my timeline and why this has come up when it has, because I know it's caused a lot of friction and questions. But Sam Shadow did propose for a 1.0 position for this family and consumer science area in her budget request. So this was proposed. She did not get notified that it was eliminated when we spoke in our transition period. So my understanding is that the 0.4 was still in our budget, and that's what I had been planning for. So I just want to clear up some of the timeline concerns that there are. And also I wanted to point out that if we are going to remove courses from our handbook that we have staff to teach in that area, that is also a concern, because the construction classes were also proposed to be removed from the opportunities handbook. And I called a meeting to discuss that with the entire administrative team. And we deemed that it needed to stay intact because we had certified staff to fill those classes if the students elected to take them. That's what electives are, their choice. And our students need to have an opportunity to pick and choose what they would like to do, because that's why they are electives. We don't fill every single elective that we offer in any of our program areas, whether it's CTE, English, science, or any other area. So unfortunately, I feel like CTE is always the one that kind of gets the shaft. I hate to use that term, but that's why I'm advocating for this and why I'm talking about it, because I do feel that there are other electives that run with 4 kids in the class and lower than 10, as Scott has been talking about. But we cannot eliminate program areas just for the sake of eliminating program areas. So I just really caution you all to think about that, and also understand that the what ifs around finding a teacher, that is always a question, no matter what subject area you're talking about. So I just ask that you think about what is most important for our school moving forward, because I really do caution you to know that if we move forward by eliminating this program area, I will continue to advocate for it in the future, and I will be back here talking with you again in the future. But I just want you to understand that if we made decisions like that every year within our operating budget of our teaching staff, then we would be in we'd be in a bad position moving forward, thinking about our teaching staff and our programs, because there's never a guarantee when you post that you're going to find someone. So I think it's just something that we need to risk and to look out for and know that in my position, I have been transparent, I have been communicating, and I've been informing everyone of what decisions I think are best, and we have to work as a team to make that happen. And I don't know if that's how things have been going for me as a team, you know, and I worry about the future, but I know how difficult the scheduling process is for Chris, but right now, everything is just requests. That's all it is. We're still moving forward with students talking to their school counselors. And we see the kids coming in and out, talking to their counselors about their schedules. Nothing is set in stone yet. We still have until April before that is even built. So we do have time to accommodate student interests. And I would just ask one more time for you to think about that as you make your decision.
So let's go back up to the board. Sue, why don't you go ahead first?
Yeah. So just to go back on what Lori mentioned, you know, we have a program committee, and I guess what I was referring to is that, in my opinion, if we couldn't find a 0.4, which to me makes sense why we couldn't find a 0.4. In my opinion, it would have been nice to have that go to the program committee with options. Hey, we could pull it, or, you know, would the board consider increasing 0.4 to, you know, 1.0 or 0.6? There could have been some two-way communication there during the program committee. And then that could have been brought to the overall board for discussion. So that's what I'm talking about on, you know, these decisions are being made behind closed doors, and we have a program subcommittee for a reason. So that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Mary?
Oh, actually, I think Carrie and Judy were before me.
Okay, sorry, I can't see who comes up first. Carrie, why don't you go?
Hi, I just, a very basic question, and as you all know, I'm new to the board, so, but I guess my question here is, so we're having this discussion right now. This is, every year, this is the time we discuss the budget. And how are we supposed to get past adding a new employee if we're bumping into when the students are making their requests, if that's such an issue? Did I make myself clear enough on that?
I maybe missed it. Maybe you could say it one more time.
Okay, so every year this is budget time. What I'm hearing now is that trying to find, before we can hire a new teacher, we need to have it approved in the budget. Then we have the offerings, but if we're trying to do this every year, aren't we going to bump into the same problem? I mean, don't we need to start planning to either do this, not do it, whether we can fit it in the 2022, 2023, perhaps not, but don't we have to get it in to the budget and not worry about, per se, the, you know, like Jacqueline was saying, if we hire somebody, we hire somebody, and if we can't, we can't. But I feel like we're just going to go in circles if we don't make a decision on this.
Yeah, I have a couple comments on that, but I'll hold it off until everybody has a chance to go. Maybe come back to Judy.
Sure. So Vin Colonna always reminded us when we would get off track that we are the Board of Education. We are not the Board of Finance. And that is very, very important, because we would get heated at times, and he in his calm but passionate way would remind us that our job is the Board of Education, not the Board of Finance. And we live in America, and we have choice in our country, and we listen to our constituents. We listen to the kids. We just asked them, for goodness sake, and we got an overwhelming amount of students who have said they would be interested. Yes, it might be some more work, but wouldn't that be worth it to have kids excited and wanting to come to school. I very clearly remember listening to parents of music and art programs come out, and we heard them. Then I very clearly heard people on Woods, and we heard them on Woods, and we restored Woods, much like this at this time of year. We also heard them on Latin, and we did listen to them once again on Latin. So I hope that we keep with our tradition of listening to our parents. And last time we heard, and it was graciously put to this meeting, well, we did two things. No, we really were looking at, do we have viable candidates or applicants? And if there's interest, the answer is yes. So I hope that we're not disingenuous and that we're not playing some kind of game, and that we are indeed being forthright and transparent. I was not part of the consultation either, and did not know and was not informed. And the normal course of action, an appropriate course of action, is that our programs committee would know the different things, and then they would come to us with a recommendation. So for those people who are on the programs committee, I think that is Sue and Mary, and I'm not sure who else because many people are new on the board, but we didn't follow that. So I think we put this out for our kids. We had people do extra work. I talked to some people in the industry as well. And I think we should vote it in and do what we often do, is we send it to the people of Marlborough, Andover, and Hebron, and we let them decide.
Okay. Mary?
Yes, just a couple things. I was listening to some of the things that Lori was sharing, and there are some concerns with putting this in now. However, it is not a new curriculum and it is not a new program. So it is literally, if we could hire someone, we could run the program, I'm hearing. So I think that makes me a little bit more comfortable in trying to do this now. And also it helped to get a better timetable on where exactly, the registration process is at the current time, which it sounds like it's not really finalized, but kids are starting to put together their requested courses. So it sounds like we still might be able to pull this together. And I do understand, and I share Lori's concern about the program. I am an early childhood person myself, and this is near and dear to my heart. And it does bother me that there's a group of students who are interested or have shown interest in foods and ECE who potentially will not get the opportunity to take those courses if they're, juniors, or if they're even sophomores. If we don't get it back in, they might miss that opportunity. And I think that's, something that's important for us to consider as well.
I agree. So I've been kind of just holding back because I wanted to just share a couple things saying I have an opinion about a few elements of this. So, kind of first of all, I just throw out there that I love the CTE program. I think I said that before. I didn't know if it was part of this meeting. I think it was last meeting, but I'm a huge fan of the CTE program. I did get a chance over the course of the last 30 days to dig in a little harder and understand more about that program, the history of it, and not just the history of, what classes are we offering, but how are we funding it? How are we supporting it from an FTE perspective? And what I noticed is that it isn't, I wouldn't necessarily call it in decline, but it's certainly not something that I think we've committed to supporting to the same degree that we would say some of the other teams or sections that are out there. And I think, this is just my personal hypothesis on that is that, this kind of standard English, math, science, we get a lot of directive from state educators and then requirements for curriculum. And so that gets kind of force fed to a certain extent and drives a lot of our decision making from that. I feel like CTE doesn't necessarily have that same oversight So maybe it becomes one of those programs where you can come back to and default to adjusting when you don't have a lot of room on other programs. So that being said, very similar to what I think Judy expressed, we are the Board of Education, and I do think that we do have, when push comes to shove, all things being equal, I would lean towards providing an opportunity versus not providing an opportunity. I think the only thing that I wanted to understand for my own personal decision in this is, so we have a motion on the floor to add a 1.0 full-time position. How does that impact what we've already, again, I don't want to quibble about how much money it is, but I think it's practical. It's only practical to understand how does it impact what we have currently in front of us, so that as we make adjustments, that we understand the actual numbers. And the second part of this is that at some point as a board, we're going to turn around and say to the administration, if we approve this, Chris, you need to figure out how to schedule this. And Scott, you need to figure out how to organize this within the budget. And I think that it's not an inappropriate thing to say, at least give some board guidance or thought on how does that happen? Do we go back, to Jacqueline's point, she was very clear about the fact that she would like to see this program supported, but not, correct me if I'm crossing up what you're saying, but not at the expense of any of the other programs at the school. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct.
So, I mean, if we're to follow that advice, then we're adding this to kind of the top line of, or adding this to the bottom line of what we've already budgeted for. So I think, to the degree that we can understand that, I would just, I know you talked about, what was the number for the full-time salary?
Eva would be able to pull more specific numbers, but it's 50, that 5 is about $50,000.
Okay.
That doesn't include health.
But that doesn't
Yeah.
include benefits if that teacher.
Right. Right, okay. So, again, I think another portion made a point of, let's not do jury rigging figuring here in the meeting. I think that's appropriate too. I think it's just appropriate that we understand that, if we do in fact vote to move this forward, then we are gonna have to make an adjustment. Whether it's to add it and just go with the added cost and then face the towns on it, which it is what it is. Or if we're gonna give some, I think it wouldn't hurt for us to at least just put some thought into it, at least give the administration some understanding of where the board's mind is on where we want to budget that if we go ahead and pass this. Are we looking for that to be added to what we've already got? Or are we looking to get sharper on the pencil and look for other areas where we can back off? Any thoughts on that?
I think we're getting, I hear you, and I think those are wise thoughts. I think we're getting a little bit outside of discussing the motion. I mean, I understand why you are, but are you asking to amend the motion?
No, not at all. I'm just asking if we do pass this, so we're either going to pass it or we're not going to pass it. And if we do pass it, it will come with requirements to go back and adjust the budget one way or another. Either we add the total on, or we add part of the total and then we cut part of the total, or we cut somewhere else and we don't have any changes. Those are kind of, I think, to a certain extent, what the courses of action options are. And I just thought it wouldn't hurt as part of, before we have this vote, to at least discuss as a board, where do we think that should happen? How do we think that should happen? Because that's a relevant part of if we vote on this, that's all. Any input at all?
I understand once again why you're asking it, and I'm a big picture person, but I also like the dollar amounts. And if we add something, either as you are saying, it increases a little bit, or something else gets taken out, perhaps. I do think that we should be focused on this motion, and with everybody understanding that those things would happen, that it would be one of the three. I don't think we would be agreeing to that along with this motion, if that,
Yeah, I didn't expect us to agree to it. I just thought it would be worth at least sharing some thoughts on it one way or the other, but that's fine. If nobody has any input on it, then clearly it's not relevant to the decision.
well, no, I mean, I do, I have a lot, but a very lot actually, but I just think it will bring us to the side a little.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I had hoped that as we looked into the budget, we would find a way to get the decrease to around 1%. I thought that it would be palatable.
It's hard to hear him.
It would be palatable to the voters to, when seeing that we have a flexible budget this year relative to some others.
All right, since we are going down that path a little, I guess a few of us, yeah, we should call the motion in a minute, but we did give back a lot of money last year, and at least one of the towns made it very clear that that was a one-year thing that they were asking us for. I do want to be careful that we keep an excellent school and that it's appropriately budgeted during this time of COVID for safety reasons, for programming, and for excellence. So once again, I mean, I think on this and thinking about offering choice and opportunity and remembering our role, we are the Board of Education. You know, and we do have different roles, and it's for reasons, and I respect the other boards. But Sue, do you think should we be calling this vote at this time, or?
I don't have any problem with calling a vote. I just don't want to cut anybody off before they finish having their opportunity to be heard. So if you don't, if we could just let Eric finish, and then if there's no other discussion, then I think we're at the point where that's appropriate. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, first, giving money back is great. But as far as communicating with the taxpayer, communicating with the voters, it's, in my view, a little more effective to give that money back through a reduced budget at the beginning, rather than returning surplus at the end. Now, it's great that we return surplus at the end. I understand it. And there will be individuals who appreciate that in the towns. But the voters who are voting on the budget are more aware of the budget level than they are of funds that got returned last year. So if our desire is to pass the budget, I think it is, that a better approach than returning money at the end is to apply savings to that following year so that we're able to deliver a reduced budget that will be accepted. So with that in mind, with the not the windfall, we've earned this situation where got this $1.5 million reduction. It seems to me that it's appropriate that the voters get a small portion of that. And if we were able to arrange things in such a way that we were able to come in at 1% below last year's budget, I think it would be a very positive thing with the voters in the three towns. Thank you.
Is there any, oh, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Just a question for Jacqueline. The commercial kitchen, around how much would that cost to put back in and
That was
put back together?
estimated around 30,000, but
That's actually a little bit closer to just slightly under 40, it's 38 something.
Okay, and is that,
that's not shopping around. That was just a one-stop quote from one company.
okay, and is that around how many students take that per year? Would take that one class? Do you know?
I don't know, because we haven't run it in 3-4 years.
Okay.
Good. Is there any other discussion?
I have one more thing, Mike.
Go ahead, Sue.
I do, on what Eric was stating, I do believe that voters are aware of the actual percentages for the operational and capital budget. This year, our operational budget, which directly impacts our students, is negative, and the capital budget is $500,000 of an increase. So I do believe our voters are aware of that. So adding back in something that will, encourage our students that do not move on to college or do not want to move on to college, to me is stating a lot. I always believe that our operational and capital budget should have balance, and it shouldn't be such a huge difference. This year, there's a big difference between our operational budget and our capital budget. So I do believe the voters are aware. So I agree 100% with Eric. So us adding a 1.0 position back in still won't come close to what we're asking for capital, but it will just, improve our class offerings for our students. Thank you.
Mary?
Yeah, I do think we're getting a little bit off path with the motion that's currently on the table, but is this category that we're talking about right now outside of this motion, it's still budget discussions, correct?
Yes, we're talking about whether or not to budget for this 1.0 FTE or not.
So it's specific to this position?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That's the motion on the floor.
No, I know, but I just meant the item we're on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, yes, it's the old business, but it's 10.1, discussion and possible action of proposed Region 8 budget.
Okay, so it could be any budget topic, correct?
It could, just the first one that came up. Yep.
Okay, all right. No, I'm just asking because I think, we probably should take action on the motion, and then we can discuss the other things that, perhaps, because there are ideas that, of other things that we could do outside of what Sue has on the table right now.
Okay, that's fair. Judy?
Yeah, just to also agree with Eric and Sue, this is really not adding something because we've had this program, and from my notes, from what everybody has said, we still would have had this program if there had been personnel. So our obstacle or barrier was that we didn't have personnel, but now we believe we do.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair point to call this to account. Any opposition to that? All right. Then, Sue, could I just ask you to repeat that, just to make sure that we're capturing the motion properly?
So you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. My motion was asking to restore the 1.0 position for family and consumer science.
Okay. That was proposed by Sue and seconded by Judy. We'll go to a roll call vote. Mary?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Sue?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Mike?
No.
Joe?
No.
Lori?
I have reservations, but I will support it. Yes.
Gabe?
No.
Jessica?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
Okay, and I am going to go on the record as a yes. That motion passes. So at this point, the Discussion is open for other budget items. Any other budget items to discuss?
That I have a question, Mike, for
Go
Scott
ahead, Mary.
or Eva. I'm even after the time that I've spent on the board, sometimes I still, what kind of things can be not pre-funded, but sort of that you could use? Can you only use the surplus for not the audited surplus, the end of this fiscal year's? If we have a surplus or I don't know what you would call it. You know what I'm talking about, I think.
So,
What can we do with that money?
so if the board chooses to do one-time purchases from this year's budget, and it has to be voted on. So again, it would have to be one-time expenditures. So something that can keep continuing from year to year.
So to translate that, we're gonna have to revisit the operating budget. That's what it comes down to. In some way, shape, or form. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Yeah, I just knew we were able to do some things last year at the end of the year that kind of helped us. And we did give that money back, which the audited surplus. And so we were in a really good position last year. I was wondering if perhaps that might be nice if we were again.
Okay. Any other budgeting discussions for 10.1? All right, if there are no further budgeting discussions, we'll move on to 11, which is new business. First up is the financials.
All right, so I might be able to help answer the question of if we're in a good position or not. So currently, at the time of writing this memo for the Board of Education, there's a net favorable position of $355,070 at the end of December. Actually should have been January, sorry, my typo. But since that time, we've received a notification from the state of Connecticut that informed us that our excess cost, there's an adjustment amount of $145,000 that's going to be, not that we're being penalized for it, we're getting reduced, our excess cost money is being reduced by $145,000. So we enter our expenditures for our high-cost special ed students 3 times a year, December 31st, March 1st, and then anything after March 1st gets, for the fiscal year, gets put in by June 30th for the close of the year. So we get payment for our December 31st and our March 1st, and then we get prior year adjustments in the February payment. So we weren't going to get a February payment because our reduction was of $145,000 from the end of last year, which is basically COVID related, because our services, our transportation, and some tuition costs weren't as high as estimated originally. So the state ended up giving us some money, but our final payment in May might negate some of that. So we're hoping that some of the costs in the current year that we're in and that we reported for March might help balance some of this off. But at the moment, our revenue is going to be short by $145,000, or actually a little bit more than that. But it was just from that estimated piece. So we're still in the black. We're still doing good. We're just not as good as what that figure was in here. So my apologies for that. But
Sorry, I have a quick question. So is that reflective of what we're tracking right now for the residual surplus or not? It's not. So this would be impact that residual.
So yeah, it will. So just to make sure that I'm understanding everybody. So the surplus from last year can only be utilized for capital non-recurring costs. It cannot offset operating in any way, shape, or form. So it's only capital non-recurring. This money that we're in a net favorable position, so we're doing good because some of our expenditures didn't come in as high as we thought they would come in. That's why we have a savings in this current year. Revenue, I have to collect the revenue to gather the whole $30 million budget that we're trying to expend. And if we have a shortfall in revenue, we can't spend over that dollar amount. So we have to balance that piece too. So unfortunately, the high cost special ed is sort of out of our control, because one day we have them and they might move out the next day. So we budget for what we know. And at the time is what we knew. And unfortunately, COVID didn't help any of that. So we did our best to service the students, but because they were remotely serviced, we didn't have the high cost of transporting the students. So I hope that answers some of that for the excess costs.
Okay.
So, and again, we've had some staff turnover, so that helped in a positive light, because higher cost person went out, lower cost person gets hired. So, and again, capital improvement, there's no significant changes there. And for capital non-recurring fund, the state DOT is the person or the entity that is working with the town of Hebron and RHAM in terms of trying to close out the project. And Mr. Tierney, who spoke earlier, on a monthly basis keeps asking the DOT, how's it going, when, and still no reply. So we're still in a waiting period on that one. So unfortunately, we can't release any money from what is known as our DOT construction project, because we don't know if they're going to find something that says we still have to pay something. So we're still holding on to that encumbrance until we know that everything's been released. In theory, we're supposed to get about $17,000 back, but until that check is here, I'm just sort of holding on to it. Are there any questions on the report or what I have spoken about as of right now? Okay. Hearing none. Student activity. So basically, the student activity is what it is. We balance with the bank statements. So classes and or programs are starting to collect money, and Ski Club was able to go this year, which I'm very happy for them, because it's been a kind of miserable winter's past. So it's nice to see the kids being able to enjoy their skiing. Are there any questions on student activity? Okay, hearing none. The food service monthly sales and expenditures for January, as of January 31st. We actually seem to do a little bit better in January than we did in December. So the net projected loss is $5,470 in totality for this fiscal year at the end of January. I'm still hoping and still in a positive light that we will break even this year. So I think that will help us out in terms of making sure that our fund balance gets back to a positive light in future years. But unfortunately, the bigger picture item that's still on the table is there's an organization called SNAC, which is School Nutrition Association of Connecticut. They help food service, especially school districts that are self-operating school districts for their food service. And they also do legislative initiatives, and they are trying to work with the State Department of Education here in Connecticut to try to get the federal government to pass a universal, again, free for everyone, so that we don't have to deal with charging students in the future. Hopefully we will know more come May, so that if we don't have to charge the students, we don't have to come up with a meal rate, because we're going to have to revisit what the costs of the meals were for families, or will be for families for next school year. So that'll be something that'll be coming up. So are there any questions on that? Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Item 12, committee reports. First one up is facilities, safety, transportation.
We had a meeting on Thursday, February 24th last week. At that meeting, President Carrie Farlino, Mike, you were there, and myself, Scott Leslie, Mike Schlehofer, and then we had some guests that were there to speak Rich Calarco was there, who's a RAM consultant, and then Ian Lacey and Scott Vose from Tom Irwin Advisors. Couple of topics were discussed. The first one was Rich Calarco providing a history of the athletic fields here at RAM, primarily on the high school side. He's talking about the 316 field, which is up against Wall Street or Route 316, the baseball field, the competition field, and the track. I'll get into some additional details, but back in 2015, the surfaces were really starting to wear down. They actually had some events canceled. Rich actually went through a rejuvenation program and was able to bring the fields back to where they are now. But one of the things that he identified is that there are still some significant issues that exist. And obviously that was the reason for the proposal that went through referendum and unfortunately lost this past referendum cycle. Tom Irwin Advisors, the two folks that I mentioned, they perform athletic drainage evaluations, soil analysis. They can do a track surface evaluation. So what they were proposing to us essentially is to complete an evaluation with recommendations on what can be done, what specifically the problems are with those 4 areas in particular that I just mentioned. They provided us with proposals to perform an assessment on each one. In addition to that, if we do select them and we decide that we're going to follow through on their recommendations, they will essentially act as the GC overseeing the performance of the improvements. They would develop the specs if necessary, if drainage is required. They would ensure compliance with all of those needs. Long story short, the cost to perform, I mentioned that they did provide estimates. The cost to perform a field evaluation on the 316 field was $9,600. Likewise for the baseball outfield, $9,600. Competition field was $9,600 and the track surface was $5,000. So I've attached all of those proposals to the minutes. Those will be published likely this week. We then transitioned over to well, that was it. Those were those 2 topics that we discussed during the meeting. Then we transitioned to talk about utilization of unexpended capital funds and the potential to perhaps cover either some of the proposals from TIA or other options. Ultimately, some of the proposals that we discussed were purchase and installation of 1 food steamer that's currently proposed under the operating budget for 2022, the proposal for 22-23. That steamer is about $30K with installation of $2,400. The next item was a portable food cooler, which is again currently proposed under the 22-23 operating budget of $8,500. Addition to that was the replacement of the 24 fire damper actuators for a total of $17,490. So the idea behind going forward on these items is to remove them from the existing proposed budget and cover those costs with dollars that we have available to us to exercise today. So the total proposed purchases under the 21-22 capital non-recurring budget would be about $58,390. So some of those costs, the first 2 items I mentioned, would be removed from the operating budget. The last one, the $17,490, would be removed from the capital budget. So that's pretty much it. But I did want to make a couple of motions to follow up on those. And I know that folks will likely have, well, why don't we open up to questions before I do so?
Fine. Is there any questions at this point? I feel like if you make the motion, it might generate.
Yeah, yep. Okay. All right. So the first motion, because of the total cost of the 4 proposals received from the turf contractors exceeds a limit, it requires us to go out to secure bids. I'd like to make a motion to authorize Superintendent Leslie to secure bids for drainage analysis of the 316 field, the high school baseball field, the competition field, the track. And that's in order to provide the district with necessary information and recommendations so that we understand exactly what needs to be done for the future. to make the appropriate repairs to the RHAM athletic facilities.
Second.
May I ask a procedural question though?
Sure.
Because I don't have the agenda in front of me, I moved rooms, but I know that we were going to talk again about the early childhood position. Do we need, and we'd probably get it, but do we need a 2/3 vote to add this to the agenda if it's not on the agenda?
Add 2/3 vote to add the mission, Sue's motion or Mike's motion?
Mike's motion.
I don't know, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think we do.
I guess we talked about this, but I actually had asked this question before, if we needed to do this as part of an addition or deletion. I guess I thought since we weren't necessarily making a motion to dedicate money, it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't hurt, Judy. I mean, it would certainly cover you.
Yeah, and
I mean, it
I'm
would be
not
an act of safety, so, yeah.
So basically what we're saying is we need more, we need a 2/3 rather than just a majority.
No,
Right.
not to pass it, but just to add it. I mean, I'll vote yes. I'll go right off. I vote yes to add whatever. But I think that the reason that safeguard is there is that is so that we are, doing business in the public eye and we're not adding things last minute. And so that's why 2/3 have to agree. Whereas at the last meeting, we said we were bringing back the early childhood. There was notice of that. We were just getting information.
Okay. So
I mean, I vote yes to add it. I just think Scott's probably right. Even if it's going above what we need to, we're better to be sure we're following things than not.
okay, so just to be clear, Judy, you're saying that we should kind of revert back to 4.4 on the agenda and vote to add this as an agenda item? Is that what you're saying?
I think we do need to do that. Yes.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. All right, so in accordance with the suggestion, is there a motion to add discussion and potential motion for bid to, well, let me ask one other question. What are the other?
I'm just going to make a motion. Yep, I'll make the motion. I'd like to make a motion to add 2 items for discussion tonight. The first is to review and authorize to secure bids for drainage analysis of our fields. And there's some, there's no dollars associated with that particular item. It's just an agreement to go ahead and ask for those bids. The second item is a proposal to utilize our 21-22 capital budget, a portion of it, to procure some one-time purchases in the form of a food steamer, a portable food cooler, and fire dampers. So my motion is to add those to tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Sue seconded it. Okay, we'll do a roll just to make sure we capture everybody's names right here. Mary?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, Joe?
Yes.
Lori?
Yep.
Gabe?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
Mike? Yes. All right. So that motion carries 11-0. So if we can fast forward then back to the committee reports and facilities, safety and transportation, come back to the discussion and I guess the initial motion, if you want to run through that.
I'll restate the initial motion. So I'd like, first is a motion to authorize the superintendent to secure bids for drainage analysis of the 316 field, the high school baseball field, the competition field, and the track. What those bids will gather is information on what it would take to perform recommended improvements to those athletic facilities, the fields in particular, and the track, so that we understand clearly what needs to be done and we can make a decision about moving forward.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Was that you, Carrie?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So go back around the room. Mary?
Yes.
Sue? I'm sorry, Eric, just keeping myself in order here.
Are we supposed to do discussion or no?
We can.
We can.
I guess all.
Yeah, my bad. Before we move on to the vote, I apologize. Is there any discussion about that bid? About that motion as far as achieving the bids? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry, Eric.
No, not at all. Not at all. I just wanted to say that I'm glad that we're looking at a number of fields here rather than looking at the one field that's been focused on in the past. And then lo and behold, we have other problems. So I'm just supportive
Okay.
in that regard.
Great. Any other discussion on this motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll go back around for a roll call. Mary?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Gabe?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes, and thank you.
Yep, and Mike. All right, so that's all, yes, so that motion carries as well, 11-0.
Okay, so my next motion is to utilize 2021, 2022 capital budget remaining unspent to purchase a food steamer and the installation costs of said food steamer. This food steamer installation is currently proposed in the operating budget for 22-23. So it would essentially remove it from that proposal and it would be covered with 21-22 funds. In addition to the steamer is a portable food cooler. We have a need for 5 food coolers over the course of the coming years. And so the idea, this one of those 5 was also included in the operating budget proposed for 22-23 at $8,500. The proposal is to pay for that with current funds available to us and remove it from the 22-23 proposal. And then lastly are the 24 fire damper actuators. These are listed on the capital proposed budget for 22-23. The proposal is to pay for those with remaining dollars for 21-22 budget and essentially remove them from the capital proposed budget, 22-23.
Okay. Discussion?
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm getting tired. Because now it's in capital. If we had supply issues and the equipment doesn't arrive in time, we're still able to carry over that capital. Is that correct?
So capital, yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
Operating, you are correct, it doesn't carry over, but
Okay.
Michael Schleifer did contact the vendors and was able to get concrete dates. So if the board approves this evening and purchase orders are cut tomorrow, they will be all said and done and delivered on time by, well, there's different dates. The latest one was June 1st, but.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And just to clarify, I think your proposal was to use existing operating budget from the 21-22 operating budget.
Yes, I probably misspoke and referred to capital unused. Yes, my apologies.
Yeah, so it would come out of our current excess funds that
So our
meet
favorable net.
our favorable net position, which will allow us to, which requires us to have that money spent and job completed by June 30th. And as Eva said, each one of those jobs can be done well in advance.
So it actually is that operational. We actually do have to spend it by the end
Correct.
of the fiscal year, but we will.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Is there a total?
I'm gonna give you a new total.
Okay.
Because, so my 2 cents, not that my 2 cents matters all that much, because, so the kitchen steamer, the labor, and the modulated refrigerator are actually higher than what we had put in the budget.
Okay.
So, and then the fire dampers, by some grace, is actually much lower than what we were budgeting for.
How does that?
Go figure. So the total dollar amount is going to be $58,627.
Okay.
You know,
Wow.
Okay.
yeah, it's funny, that's what it was without the adjustment. Yeah, I think so. But anyway, not important.
Any other discussion?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Anybody online? Any comments, concerns?
Nope.
All right. Then let's go to a roll call.
What was the second? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah, this, I thought there was a second. Carrie? No, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Mary?
Mary, okay, Mike, thank you. Okay, Mary,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Carrie?
I just need to be clear because I lost connection. This is Mike's second proposal, or second motion on the facilities.
Yes,
Yes, my vote is yes.
okay. Mike,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Gabe? Yes. Jessica,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes, and thank you once again.
and I vote yes. All right, so that motion carries as well. All right, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, finance, audit, compliance, and insurance.
We did not have another meeting from our last meeting, so I don't have anything to report. I see on the schedule that our next meeting is April 7th, which I do believe does conflict with the RHAM Coffee House night. So I don't know if that means anything for us. I know I will be attending coffee night since my son will be playing. But yeah, I think that's it. Do any of the other committee members have anything they'd like to add? No.
Okay,
No.
Okay, thank you.
all right. Negotiations?
There are none.
You guys haven't met, or there's no negotiations going on, anything for the group? Got to do anything? No, okay. Policy?
Yeah, same with policy. We haven't met, so nothing to update you on.
Program and communication?
Ditto for us. We have not met since our last meeting, and we are also scheduled to meet on April 7th.
Okay, great. And then facilitators, Judy for EastCon?
Actually, the one thing I would like to share with the board, I'd let Mike know this. I am starting to focus on some other things in my life. So if someone is interested in taking over the EastCon position, it's very interesting. And if you can let Mike and me know, and then we can get exactly to you what it means, because I think that you would still be one of the seated executive committee, but I'm not certain when someone steps off. So I would have to get that to you. So that's something I think many of you would be excellent at and interested in. So, you know, please feel free to reach out and I can explain more about it. But the meeting's already going late and I know we have executive session tonight too.
Okay. And Cabe, Judy?
Cabe, I did email folks some things from Cabe and only about half of the board responded to my email. Why don't I do that again? And then I'll follow up with all of you with text because I want to make sure you're getting the valuable information.
Okay.
So just to clarify that there are very good information filled emails that are being sent. And I want to make sure that everybody's getting them. Otherwise we'll get you on the list. So I'll send something again forward and please just respond. And if you don't, I'll just have a list and I'll follow up and text you to see, because we want to make sure you're all getting that valuable information.
Okay. Thank you. All right, at this point, we move to public comment again. I don't need to read this again. No. Yeah, okay. So the same comments as the initial public comment. Anybody in the audience here for public comment? Anybody online for public comment?
I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
My name is Mary Rose Mead. I live at 109 Church Street in Amston. And I have to, full disclosure, I'm a taxpayer in Hebron. I'm a parent. I've had 4 kids go through the schools. Well, my last one is still there. But I also work as an employee in Region 8. So you can take my comments from any of those lenses. I was really happy to hear Judy talk about the fact that you're a Board of Education. We had a few years where there was just cutting to everything that was happening in our school. And the impact of some of those cuts are still felt in our programming and the way that we can provide a well-rounded education for our students who are, whether they're going to college or they're going into a career pathway. You know, in the last 7 years, actually, over 7 years, we cut 8 English teachers, which impacted our ability to serve the needs of some of our struggling students. We cut a curriculum director, which impacted our ability to create a more cohesive 7 to 12 academic district. And one of the hugest impacts that has been felt is the loss of a full-time media center specialist at the high school. So, you know, as a taxpayer, this is not the time to add anything back in, you know, to this budget. But I would say I'm going to ask the board, please, as you look forward for future planning for next year, please consider restoring at the very least our media center specialist and support, you know, our attempts to support our weaker students, our students that need tier 2 intervention, to make sure that they also have the English language arts supports that they need. Our media center was a vibrant, lively, electric place. My older 3 sons absolutely grew and thrived. And that position was cut to a shared position between 2 schools. And the person who's serving in that position is valiantly trying to carry out service to, 1,200 students or so that we have in the district. We're not a poor school, and we should have a full-time library media specialist at our high school. So looking forward for the 23-24 school year, I ask the board to please consider restoring some of the things that we've lost under the previous superintendent, and to continue to look at the things that NEASC cited us for and praised us for, and ensure that those things are still part of what makes RHAM a really rich school experience for all of our students. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else online for public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 14, informational items. Scott, did you have anything to put in for the calendar?
I don't. Nope, I have nothing.
Okay, and then the student discipline is in there. Any comments or concerns on either of those? Okay. Hearing none, move on to item 15, executive session.
So we're going to change the link for our remote board members. Those board members that are remote, I just emailed you the documents that I'm going to be sharing with the board members that are present. I'm hoping that we can do this in about 5 minutes, since I understand I know it's late. And
Don't we need a motion to?
yes, need a motion to go to executive session.
So my bad, I apologize. So is there a motion to move on to executive session?
I make the motion.
I second
Thank you,
it.
Sue.
Well, but hang on. I make the motion that we move into executive session and we invite the superintendent into the executive session.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I second.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move on to executive session.